start first and foremost with the Rwanda policy. The Church of England describes it as immoral. Some people might suggest that's perhaps over-egging the pudding somewhat. What's your view?
Well, we think this policy is unworkable, and we're seeing that play out over these few days. It's incredibly expensive. It's going to cost possibly over £1 million per unsuccessful or successful refugee going to Rwanda. And we do think it's unethical, and it's quite un-British, actually, because, you know, we've been known around the world as a safe haven for those genuinely fleeing persecution and war. It's been part of our makeup in this country for decades, and we just don't think this policy is going to work on any of those levels. And it's not going to stop the illegal trafficking of people across the Channel either. But
at least we do know from the High Court and indeed the Court of Appeal yesterday that it's not illegal.
Well, we tried to make it not legal by opposing it in Parliament. That's where we sit, and that's what we try to do. But there are things the government could be doing that they're not doing to stop the continuation of huge numbers of people making that dangerous crossing across the Channel, and they're not doing it.
Explain then the immorality in this particular policy. I mean, our correspondent Shingi Marariki has been looking at the accommodation that has been set aside for these asylum seekers to live in. Doesn't look like there's anything that you could possibly complain about there. Rwanda itself has been making massive strides in terms of its human rights record over the past couple of years. So where is the immorality?
Well, unethical, I think, is the phrase I use. But, I mean, look, I think the point is that even those who are successful with their asylum applications, so they have got a strong case why they fled persecution, they fled war, and they're looking for a safe haven here in the UK, even those whose applications would be successful are not then allowed back into the country. They have to stay in Rwanda in that sense.
Would you be happy with the policy if someone who failed in their asylum claim here, popped on a plane to Rwanda, is successful there? Would you be happy with the policy if they could come back?
Well, I don't think it's workable either. That's the issue, and we're seeing that play out here. It's incredibly expensive. That money would be better spent. I mean, firstly, they are cutting the budget of the National Crime Agency, the very agency whose job it is to seek out these smugglers and stop them from what they're doing, cutting it by 20%. We've got a huge backlog in asylum claims in this country. That's why we're seeing people for years on end being housed in expensive hotels and things like that because their applications aren't being processed. We haven't got the return arrangements with France and Belgium and so on that we used to have. So when people who haven't got a right to be in this country, whose claims are unsuccessful, we can't return them in the way that we used to do. And what we want to make it illegal for these smuggler gangs to advertise on social media, which at the moment they can. So there's lots the government could be doing that aren't doing. And we fear, I think, and we're seeing this play out, that this is a deliberately controversial policy designed to take attention away from the government's other problems and get us all talking about something else.
Well, let's talk about something that I'm sure you identify as a problem for the government, the Northern Ireland Protocol and the changes that the government is wishing to bring in. I mean, the European Union is saying that it cannot be renegotiated. But even you, I assume, would concede that there are issues around the Good Friday Agreement when power sharing is not taking place demonstrably in Stormont right now, and businesses are complaining about there being a border in the Irish Sea, so to speak. What's your view?
Well, there are issues with the way the protocol is being implemented, so there are things that could be resolved, and they are within the kind of broad remit of the protocol to be able to resolve them. There are those avenues to do that. Let's not forget that the Northern Ireland Protocol is a fundamental part of the withdrawal agreement, us leaving Brexit. It was negotiated by Boris Johnson. It's his deal. He signed on the dotted line. And I think the issue here is one of tactics. The government are now pressing the nuclear button at the very sort of beginning, really, of this sort of process of renegotiation. And that's breaking down trust completely.
But wouldn't it all look rather silly when the DUP say, do you know what, that's enough to get us back into power sharing in Stormont?
Well, I don't know that it is going to be enough, and there's obviously many other parties.
If it is, and they head back in, on that basis, doesn't it look, a bit justified?
Well, there are other issues here. We do need to have a good working relationship with the European Union as well. We don't want to start some kind of trade war because we pressed the nuclear button, a unilateral nuclear button, to say an agreement we signed up to only a few months ago, we now want to renege on. That doesn't show us in a very good light internationally. Just at the point we've got a cost of living crisis in this country, problems with supply chains, problems with food imports, energy imports and so on. We don't want to make that worse right now. And also, with the war in Ukraine, we want a united front across the whole of Europe, not this division. So again, this is very poor tactics from the government. I think with good leadership, building trust, statecraft, and really negotiating hard on behalf of the government, we could resolve many of these issues.
I mean, you mentioned good leadership there. I mean, so Keir Starmer, where did it all go wrong? I mean, when the deputy leader of the party is telling him that he needs a bit more welly into his performances, it suggests that things are not going entirely to plan.
Well, I would disagree with that very, very strongly. I think when you look at the journey that Keir Starmer has taken the Labour Party on in the last 2 years, when we came out of that 2019 general election defeat where the Conservatives got a massive majority of 80 seats. It was
investigated by Durham Police, investigated by the Standards Commissioner. For someone who portrays himself as whiter than white, this is not a good look right now.
Well, as I say, I mean, we've come a long way in a short space of time from our worst general election defeat to now being, consistently sort of ahead in the polls. People trust us. People are looking at us afresh. But are we complacent about that? Absolutely not. Do we think that just because the government are having a terrible time, which they are of their own making, does that mean it will all fall in our laps? No, we don't think that. And Keir Starmer is the first person to remind us all of that every week at the Shadow Cabinet, which I'm sure he'll do very shortly at this week's Shadow Cabinet as well.